another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever.
The Sock Jig Sneaker Podcast is energized by horse electrolytes. Welcome to episode 73 of the Sock Jig Sneaker Podcast. I'm your host, Sock Jig. You can follow me on Twitter at SockJig and on Instagram as well. So for the podcast, it's been a while since I've been able to talk about topical news, topical sneaker news, because I was doing my 3-part series. So I wanted to reach back and talk about some stories that happened earlier this summer. I wanted to talk about the shoe surgeon getting sued by Nike, and I'm not going to go into full details on the lawsuit, but I am going to talk about a lot of the gaps in the coverage of the lawsuit that I've been seeing. And then for a large chunk of the podcast, I'm going to be talking about EQL and customer data and privacy policies. This was related to an incident that happened on Twitter. In case you didn't see, some guy criticized EQL that he always loses, and they did a dunk reply on him saying, hey, actually, you did win once. And the issue was they posted his private customer data just to dunk on the guy. And then I had pointed it out to them that it was probably an issue. And at first they pushed back that, this is just a one-time exception. We were just letting the guy know. But then they quickly deleted all those tweets because they realized it probably was not a good idea to do. So I'll explain the whole thing, what happened and why it was a big issue and why it was a big deal and why these things could be potentially company-ending events. Also, I realized this week that this is the 4-year anniversary of this podcast. I posted the first episode of this podcast in September 2020. And, at first I was hoping to do this every 2 weeks or so, but then I quickly realized that I'm just not cut out for on-the-fly riffing and conversations all the time. But, I'm not really out there trying to be a social media influencer. So I treat this as my creative outlet, and that's why it happens like every 3-4 weeks instead of weekly or so. But I appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate every day one listener. I appreciate anyone who has just listened since the last episode. My goal has always been to just create something different than other podcasts out there. And when you do something different, you really don't have any competition at all. So that's how I feel. On feet lately, I've been wearing the AirTech Challenge 2 Hot Lava, the 2019 version that I had. I know that the reimagined one has come out, the Age Sole and all that. And I was like, I still have this from 2019. So I pulled it out and I've been wearing it for the last couple weeks. And I was like, I don't need the new version. It's aged or whatever. But then I found out that the new one has much better leather and quality and stuff. But oh well, I'm doing fine with the one that I have. And it's one of those shoes that comes back every 5 or 6 years. So, if my 2019 one falls apart in 5 years, I will have a new one to pick up in 2030 or whatever it is. 2 other sneakers I've been wearing a lot that are recent pickups. I've been wearing the Adidas Shadow Turf, Song for the Mute Shadow Turf. And this is a cream black pair. It actually released last year. It was a collab with Song for the Mute and Adidas. And I guess it was Australia only. And I liked it back then and I tried to get it. And it was one of those overnight drops and I never ended up getting it. And so they released it this year and it's a fire colorway. I wanted it since last year. And so I bought it. I've actually been wearing it a lot. It works well with Adidas track pants or shorts for the summer. Also on feet has been the Joe Fresh Goods 990 V6 New Balance, the Prom Blue colorway. Thank you very much to Joe Fresh Goods himself for sending these over to me. The 990 V6 is my favorite new silhouette. It's the one I wore the most last year, the Baklava 990 V6. And it's the one I took to Japan to wear. So it's ultra comfortable and it's a sneaker that I wear if I go for walks and contemplate life. And honestly, I'm usually thinking of the podcast and stuff when I'm going on these walks anyways and not contemplating life. Maybe I should be contemplating life. So I'm a huge fan of the silhouette and I've been wearing these 990 V6 Prom Blue a lot. So thank you again to Joe Fresh Goods for sending them over. That is all on him. It's not on me. He decides on who gets what and when or what. And so I'm just super thankful that I make the cut. And so I really do value and appreciate it when you do get something like that. So to continue that same theme, I also picked up the Patrick Ewing Yandel SL33. And these were sent to me by my guy Jonas at Ewing Athletics. And shout out to him. He's an awesome guy. He does a lot of work over there at Ewing Athletics. And I know Ewing Athletics has a lot of these big 80s basketball sneakers, and I think they want to have a more low profile silhouette as well. And I think that's what they're going with these SL33 lows. And this is a collab with the Puerto Rican reggaeton singer Yandel. And the sneaker itself is like a brown-green mix with like a beef and broccoli theme almost. And all the accessories are really nice. There's like a Patrick Ewing ball keychain, and there's a comic inside the box. And the shoe itself is a reference to the Calle Mountain in Puerto Rico. And I've obviously never been to Puerto Rico, but my personal mountain story is I grew up in Western Canada. I've always been surrounded by mountains. It's always been in my peripheral vision. And so the first time as a kid I ever went to like the prairies and it was just flat as far as you could see, I remember just being super disoriented, not having these kind of mountains always around you. And that's just how it is in Vancouver and the Pacific Northwest. You have these giant mountains that are always surrounding you. They're looming, especially on sunny days where they look super close. And on rainy or gray days, which is like November to May, probably even longer, they look super far away, but you know that they're there and they orient you in a way. But shout out to my guy Jonas at Ewing Athletics for sending these over. Other pickups, and these are from like the last like 3 months or so because I haven't done this segment in a while. I picked up the Kith A6 Silver Surfer Gel Piano 14. That one I got from the early access. And those ones I have in hand, and they're much more lavender in hand than in the photos. And even the toe box is see-through. I didn't even see that in the initial photos. I'm not sure if you would see it unless it was on foot. But still a nice pair. I got just like the regular comic book inside it. I also got the Magneto 1130. So in the early access, I only bought the one sneaker. I didn't try to go for multiple, and I got the Gel Piano one. Then on the official drop, I just went for the Magneto 1130, and Kith Canada, as I mentioned previously, is a little bit easier buying than it is on the US site, and so I was able to get them in my size. So those ones have shipped. There have been delays in that, so I don't have them in hand yet. I also picked up the Pata Air Max 1 Chlorophyll from early access. I got an email that, hey, you have access to this sneaker. And so it's a great feeling where you can just check out and not have to worry about it. So that's how I was able to get them early. And apparently what they did was multiple rounds of early access. And so I must have been in that first round. And then I know that they did a few more rounds. And I know a few people who got access there. So if you previously bought anything from Pata, maybe the Jordan 7s or the Air Max 1s, you may have got access. And as I covered in my series and in my conversation with Corey, a lot more stores are doing a more public version of friends and family or early access and rolling it out to select customers so only they could check out. And that's kind of what I got. It was a site with a password, but this email said only you could check out, and it had a time on it that you have to check out before this day and time. So I was thankful to get that email because it was dropping at 4 a.m. Pacific on my time, so I was able to just sleep through it. I legit wasn't sure if it was going to sell out or not. I wasn't sure if it was going to be like how the Huff thing was. I just assume these days anything with a big name has big stock on it, and that's just how Nike's been operating lately. So this time, either the stock was depleted in all these rounds of early access, or the stock was just lower than usual and demand was high. Either way, happy to have these. And these were originally released in this kind of window where I was not buying sneakers. I was trying to save up for a house, and I wasn't in sneaker collection mode. I was saving to buy a house. And so no regrets on that, on buying a house in that era instead of, cranking that Soulja Boy. And look, overall, I still think Nike shouldn't be re-releasing every single grail that they have. Unless I like that shoe, then they can release it. But really, that's how it's going to be. I still don't like the concept that they're re-releasing a ton of grails, and really do think they should be worrying about what's next. But one or two grails, the ones that I always wanted, I'm not made of stone here. For skips, I honestly did skip a lot this summer. I had a unexpected big bill that kind of helped matters in the way that I was like, okay, I gotta direct money this way instead of towards sneakers. And that's all right. There's always ebbs and flows and when you buy or sell stuff. So honestly, when I looked at sneakers in the last while, they were either like nice and would be nice to have, but not really necessary right now, or they were just too expensive, or, just full on, just not a fan. In the too expensive category, the Thunder Max, the new yellow and green and neon that they've come up with, those are a little too expensive at 180 US. And their women's model as well, I just kind of veer away from women's models. I'm a men's size 12. They're always a little narrow. I had the CDG Thunder Max and they fit a little snug. So, I'm not going to go out of my way to get a size 14 women's model or whatever it is. So easy to skip at 180 US. The J-Tips Saucony, that's one that was nice, that I liked it, but still it comes out to like 200 shipped for me. So I was like, I don't exactly need this. And I have the Crystal Cave OmniGrid 9s, and in size 12, they fit a bit snug for me, that model. So I would have had to go for a 12.5 or a 13, and I'm not even sure if he had a 12.5. So I just skipped it entirely. But, I like that J-Tips is out there making waves. It's good for sneakers. It's good for sneaker culture. Sneakers always need something new and fresh and new collaborators. It's something I've been calling on this podcast. So I skipped out on the Alma Manier 3. Liked it. It was nice. A bit too expensive. I think it's a good shoe. The box is nice. And it's a women's silhouette. And I heard later that it's narrower than the last one. And so again, a men's size 12 is not really made to be narrow. I got a big foot, so it's easy enough for me to skip it. Everyone who got it said they're really nice in hand, and maybe I will regret it later, but maybe I might be able to get it like onto retail later as well too. Along the same lines, I'll probably skip the Jordan 4 that's coming up as well too, the light-skinned one. Pretty sure it's not called the light-skinned one. While you were sleeping, I guess, Jordan 4. Some sneakers I skipped because I'm just not a fan. The Nigel Jordan RM remastered. It's just a Jordan 4 low. That always looked like a Foot Locker wall shoe to me, and was probably pitched as like a GR Foot Locker wall shoe. And then they got Nigel involved, and I know there was some back and forth that maybe it should just be Nigel's shoe. It's good that they, gussied up and dressed up a few for Nigel, and he delivered on his side. He got the people to show up, and he got the people to like the shoe, and I guess they made the right number of those sneakers as well too. So the release itself was really nice and well done. The whole bike riding through New York that he and Kith partnered on as well too was good. So either way, my opinion on it doesn't matter. If you like it, it's awesome. Along the same lines, I saw that there's this Who Decides War Jordan flight court that looks kind of similar, and my friend CJ Scoot on Twitter had a good point, and he said that, skaters early on were inspired by Jordan, wearing Jordan 1s and things like that. And lately it's been kind of the reverse, where Jordan brand has been taking inspiration from skateboarding. The Jordan 1s having the smaller swoosh on all the GRs. That first came from the Jordan 1 SB, the Jordan 4 SB as well too. And this flight court looking more like an SB than it does like a Jordan. So kind of cool that two seemingly unrelated Nike sub-brands take inspiration from each other. Some upcoming sneakers, the Black Cement 3s that are supposedly dropping Black Friday. That's another sneaker where I don't really need. The new version doesn't look that different from my 2018 pair. So I will skip out on those, and I'm sure they'll come back in 5-6 years. And by that time, I'll probably need that pair again. The Black Toe 1 is also coming back, and the difference being it's reimagined with the Air Jordan on the panels instead of the wings, much like the Jordan poster where you had him around his neck. Those are nice. I do have the Black Toe 1s that came out in like 2016, 2017 or so, and they're all covered in crystals. So probably because I didn't wear them enough, I only wore them like once or twice, and they're back in the box and they're covered in crystals. Also along the lines, I saw the Z Sneakerheads post about the Jordan Undefeated 4 having a Nike Air version and a Jordan version. And, in my half sleep when I first saw that post, I thought that, it was saying that the Nike Air version would be $200 and that the Jordan version would be $225. And that didn't make sense to me because, usually the Nike Air version is a little bit more because they have to pay a license to have Nike Air on the shoe. And honestly, it was probably my mistake. I was half asleep, and I think the 200 was part of the product code for the Nike Air version. But what it does tell you is that it not having a price means that it's probably a friends and family release. So they're probably going back to making 72 pairs, and only the Nike Air version is going to have no price and friends and family only. And so one of those things where, you don't have to be an insider or anything. You can just kind of read the tea leaves from the post. I don't think Z Sneakerheads actually confirmed that, so, listen to them and not me. This is just me guessing. So other than that, for the fall, I think the one that I'm most looking forward to is the return of the Spiridon OG, like the OG colorway. Last time I bought it when it came out in, again, 2015 or so. The size 12 was too snug for me. I need to wear a size 13 in the sneaker. So I would like to have that original colorway in a size 13. I didn't get a chance to talk about this earlier because I was working on my series, but Nike is finally suing Shoe Surgeon. And hey, look, it's another story where I called that shit. I was the one out here saying it appears that he's mass producing fakes and Nike knows all about it, but they're not doing anything about it. Well, now they are. Here we are. And the smoking gun for me was when they sued Warren Lotus and sued La La Land, which was producing the shoes for Warren Lotus. When they went into that factory, they saw an assembly line mass producing Mars Yard Jordan 1s, which were his product, his customization. So he was in that same factory mass producing those sneakers, allegedly. These were not being one-on-one custom handmade or anything. They were on a mass production assembly line. So no one else really put this together, and I was the only one who literally put two and two together and was saying on this podcast and on Twitter that there's no one else but Shoe Surgeon himself doing that. But Nike didn't sue him, and the rumor that I heard was that the Shoe Surgeon has some sort of legal document that protected him from lawsuits from Nike. And that legal document is most likely what's called a covenant not to sue document. Diplomatic immunity, if you will, if you've seen Lethal Weapon 2. And the other rumor that I heard at the time was that his mom works at Nike, and I couldn't confirm that either. All I did was a quick Google search of his last name and executives having the same last name. I didn't see anything, so I wasn't gonna detective it any further than a Google search. So back to that legal document though. If that document did exist, if he had that in place, that would explain why Nike didn't sue. But they obviously are suing him now. So either he did not have that document and that really was a rumor, or he did have that document and he violated the terms of that document and they're going to sue him anyway. I guess we'll find out soon enough, because if the document exists, he would most likely present that in his defense. So there's multiple aspects to the lawsuit, about the school and the academy and all that kind of stuff, but I don't want to talk about any of that. I only want to talk about two things. One is what Nike calls him infringing Nike's trademarks and creating infringing shoes. New infringing shoes is how they exactly call it in the lawsuit. These are the one-off, some celebrity pays you $6,000, you put Python on it. For that part, I personally don't have any problem with him doing that. If some dumbass celebrity wants a shitty custom from Shoe Surgeon, they can pay him $6,000 and he can do that. The other more damning aspect to the lawsuit is the shoes that he's creating entirely from scratch, which Nike is calling counterfeit Nike shoes. They are saying that he is mass producing counterfeit Nikes. None of this bespoke sourcing fee bullshit. Full on assembly line, just like the Mars Yard stuff that I talked about earlier. So in my mind, that is the key part of the issue, because they would not sue this guy if he was just some cobbler. He was, a Geppetto, Pinocchio's Geppetto, hard at work in the studio, cobbling all these shoes. He's got 80 employees. He's got a ton of people working for him. That does not scale being a shoe cobbler, even if you train all these people. You can't just have a whole bunch of shoes available in any size that you want at that scale. And that's what he had on his site. It's in the lawsuit. He had a 4th of July sale where you can get any of these Nikes, any size, and he would get it to you and ship to you soon enough. And those are all entirely made from scratch. And this is the part where if it gets to court and a trial and all that kind of stuff, it'll most likely be settled before that. But whatever settlement, I'm going to assume that this is the key part that Nike wants shut down. Him hand cobbling some Python on some bullshit $6,000 sneaker made of gold for some dumbass celebrity. I'm sure Nike's fine with that, but in the context of their lawsuit, they can't exactly ignore it. If they ignore it, the defense will just say, well, you're ignoring all that kind of stuff. And that part, I assume he'll be able to continue doing that. And I know I said I'm going to make a moratorium on sneaker content about sneaker content, but honestly, I've been shocked that the coverage of the surgeon only covers this part, the hand cobbling Python custom stuff, that Nike is trying to prevent him from making these one-off customs. And from what I've seen, they don't cover at all that he's allegedly mass producing fakes at an assembly line. One, Jacques Slade posted a hard-passed social clip talking about this case, and he did not cover the mass producing entirely from scratch sneakers in that social clip at all that he posted on Twitter. He did all the other stuff, the sourcing fees, the worked with LeBron and that kind of stuff. He admitted himself that he is friends with Shoe Surgeon, and literally weeks before it, he did one of those, what's in your closet things with him, and he showed a whole bunch of trash customs that he has in his office. So he has some sort of relationship with it, and when you don't cover the main part of the lawsuit of your friend, makes me go, And maybe in the full video, he does cover it more in depth, but I do know that he has said in his hard pass stuff that he has a writer that writes stuff for him. So I don't even know if he wrote what he said on there, but it's his name, it's his post, and he's the most famous sneaker YouTuber guy. So what he's putting out there for his friends at least told me a lot. Second, Complex, who previously called Shoe Surgeon a friend of the show, they didn't even talk about it. They decided not to talk about their friend of the show being accused of massive infringement by the biggest sneaker brand in the world. And I'm talking about the guys on the actual podcast, not about some writer, Zach Visual Basic, wrote an article about it. That guy doesn't count. So in my mind, them not talking about it was a deliberate choice because they rather talk about arbitrary rankings or things like that. And in the past, Surgeon has done like promo contests with them where entries on Complex could win entries to Surgeon School and things like that. I know Complex Con is around the corner. I don't know if he's involved with that in sponsorships or anything like that. But to me, if you don't even cover it on your flagship shows, it shows that you don't think it's important. And you being friends with the guy makes me go, And even recently, there was a post on LA Times about an update from Surgeon on his side. And that's where the article said he's got 80 employees. And the article did not talk about mass producing sneakers from scratch at all. It talked about all the other bullshit, that he's just an artist guy and he's trying to work with Nike and he's really shocked that this all happened. And he's trying to come up with his own sneaker line that he has to put on pause, that he's just an artist guy being unfairly taken advantage of by Nike. It did not cover at all that he's allegedly mass producing counterfeit sneakers on an assembly line with a Nike logo on it, and that Nike might have a problem with that. And this article by the LA Times was written by the business reporter who covers influencers. And to me, it came across like a PR stunt that the PR team planted this story with a reporter. Hey, can you work on this guy? He's this artist. He's unfairly taken advantage of. A tit for tat thing, maybe. I don't know. But there's no reason for this soft coverage of this guy who's allegedly mass producing counterfeit sneakers from scratch. So either Surgeon has a PR company out there leaning on people to give him good coverage, or he's leaning on his friends himself to give him good coverage, or maybe those friends are just doing it themselves just because they can. Because to me, if you are not telling the complete story, or if you're not even wanting to talk about it at all, then that shows me that you are essentially trying to help him, that you are helping the con. The Con is what I'm going to call it. Shout out to Tegan and Sarah. Great album, The Con. Part of the con man's con is having the illusion of legitimacy. And that's where the term con man comes from. It means confidence man, where you gain the trust of the victim. And that is a key part of the scam. And so if you have people out there saying, this guy is just a hard at work shoe cobbler, he's Geppetto, he wouldn't cheat Nike, he's helping them. And meanwhile, behind the scenes, he's got assembly lines chugging out Jordan 1s. You are essentially helping him. You are part of the con, whether you want to or not. That's how I view it, and I'm not sure if that's how others view it, and that's why I'm here to talk about it. Look at Zeta Kicks as an example. Zeta Kicks was fulfilling some orders with legit pairs. That was part of the con. That was the part of the way to gain trust of the people who were buying from him. That when they got the pairs and they got them for dirt cheap, they were like, hey, this guy is legit. You don't understand. He got me my pairs. He must have some plug. That way, the victim, he's been convinced that these pairs are legit. Meanwhile, the pairs were legit, but they were just bought from StockX or eBay or wherever. And it was all part of this massive Ponzi scheme that was going to collapse. But some of those early buyers, they were like, you don't understand. He always fulfilled. He was awesome. You got scammed, bro. That's what I'm alleging here. that this guy is scamming everyone, that he makes it look like that he is Geppetto, that he's just a shoe cobbler guy. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, he's doing massive infringement, and the people covering him are not talking about it. That's why I laugh. Every once in a while, this topic of legitimate sneaker journalism comes up, and these names are always bandied about. These guys are legit. And people always say, you want legit sneaker journalism? Then demand more from these sources that you call legit sneaker journalism. Really, there is no such thing as legit sneaker journalism. There's no New York Times standards of sneaker journalism. If there was, you couldn't accept any gifts from any brands or anyone. You would have to send all those back because you are a legit journalist of the New York Times standards, but that doesn't exist. There's no one paying for that. That's why this content creator version of this exists. So anyways, back to making it about myself. If you listen to what they said about Shoe Surgeon or Zeta Kicks, both before and after, either they said nothing at all or nothing of substance, or they gave you an incomplete story for whatever reason. And if it's the case of ignorance or worse, covering for your friends, that's not sneaker journalism. That's helping the con. Speaking of pulling receipts, the next topic is about EQL and privacy. And in case you didn't see me talking about this on Twitter or miss some of it or, opted out as I mentioned in the beginning, the short version is Sneaker Fetish Kari originally tweeted some praise for EQL in a tweet in the context of the successful JTips release. And then Twitter user jboston617 replied to that tweet with a video clip scrolling through all the L's that he's taken on EQL. And EQL responded to the guy saying, well, actually you did win in August, and that month was not included in the video clip, and it included more information about him, his shoe size, and the number of accounts that he had. And everyone had a lot of fun with it, but when I saw the tweet, I was like, this is a big red flag to me. And I know people might think that this is not a big deal, it's just a reply to a tweet. And I'll explain exactly why I thought it was a big deal and why there was more than one red flag, more than one siren that was going off in this whole interaction that happened over the course of a couple hours. So I promise not to make this overly boring about privacy wonk and legal stuff or anything. This is more about businesses and public trust and customer data and why for tech companies, protecting customer data is one of the most important things you got to do. And not about me hating on EQL or anything like that. If anything, I will explain why I thought I was trying to help them. So for the segment, I talked to Sneaker Fetish Kari, whose original tweet kicked this all off. And I talked to jboston617, who posted the video clip that also kicked this all off. And I got his side of the story. And really, his side of the story is probably not what you think. I did not reach out to EQL for a statement or anything. They already apologized and deleted a lot of tweets, so I figured that was enough. Really, they're probably not that happy about me rehashing this all, but I will explain why I think I was helping. I also want to be clear that this story is about EQL and tech companies, tech startup companies at large. And EQL especially is a data collection company. They collect a bunch of data, they put an algorithm on it, and they make money doing it. I know when people were talking about it on Twitter, it went in many directions, but I just wanted to be clear. This is not going to be about one person doxing another person. This is not going to be about a nurse looking up a celebrity's medical file and HIPAA violations and all that kind of stuff. This is specifically going to be about tech companies because EQL, they are a tech company. They are a tech startup. So I'm going to be talking about how companies choose to project their image and how they choose to react to critics, and how they want their voice and stuff out there, how they handle customer data in doing so, and how if they mishandle customer data, it could be potentially the end of their company. And I know you might be thinking, how'd this go from some dunk reply tweet to the company being over? Well, I got a lot of notes here, so I'm going to be talking about it for the next 20 minutes. And that's why I've said before, this has kind of secretly always been a business podcast. But as always with these kind of segments, I have to give you disclaimers and disclosures. First off, I did get a statement from Sneaker Fetish Kari. I asked him about his involvement with EQL because he had posted a lot of tweets praising EQL, and he had posted a video previously, it's like a async Q&A with the EQL CEO, and in that video he had said it was not sponsored at all. So I asked him, Do you have or are you working on any type of relationship with EQL? His answer was, quote, not at the moment, no. I've spoken to the team and they mentioned potentially working officially down the line, but for now, no, end quote. So that's what he had to say about it. And so anytime I talk about his replies or what he said, refer back to what his statement on that was. In terms of my qualifications, in case people didn't know, I'm a software developer and I've been a software developer for over 20 years. And my day job is basically coding features that show and store customer data, their private data. So I know a lot about this topic, especially in the tech world. So this is not just something I read an article about once a long time ago. This is something where I know and I do, and I take privacy and security training and certification every single year because it's a requirement at my work. So I know this stuff in detail is what I'm saying. In terms of me and EQL, not that it matters, but my personal EQL history is that I have won one raffle, which is for the Joe Fresh Goods New Balance 610 pair, the orange pair. And that's a sneaker that went on sale later, so probably was not hard to get. And all the rest have been L's for me for size 12. And I have one account, which I use with my government name. Also, I have talked with 2 people from EQL in DMs in the past, and mostly just casual conversation. Usually it's about things I've said on the podcast, and it's all been polite and friendly and even complimentary that my coverage has been fair. So we've also talked about the potential of setting up an interview with either a marketing person or the CEO for the podcast, and the timing just hasn't worked out. But also I didn't pursue it this summer just because I was working on that 3-part series, and I also wanted to work on that Sockalizer site that I made. I figured, let me just do the kind of things that I want to do on my own without having to be influenced by an interview early on. So that's why I was like, part of my series and part of that site I wanted to code, let me do that on my own before I proceed with an interview request. I was also personally invited to join their Discord to just check it out to see what it's like. And there's a few steps to link your Discord account to your EQL account. So I did everything except that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But at the time, I just went into the general channels and I said hi and I chatted for 5-10 minutes and I closed Discord and didn't look back at it again. And a few weeks later, when I did look back, when some drop happened and people were saying, oh, you can see what's happening in the Discord, I went to go check it out and I did not have access to any of the channels because it was requiring that I link my personal EQL account with my Discord account, which I didn't want to do, and I just dropped the whole thing because it's not like I use Discord very often anyways. But overall, I have no deal with EQL, no branding thing, no interview lined up or anything like that. I have also never received free sneakers from Jean-Michel Lemieux, aka JM Wind, previous guest on this show. He is a consultant for EQL and he sometimes gives away free sneakers on Twitter. And so just wanted to make that clear that I've never received anything from him. All I've got from him is his appearance on this podcast. So with all that said, there was a lot of this kind of keep the same energy type of talk. And so some of it, I can't tell if it was subtweeting to me or to others. But when it comes to like tech sneaker companies and myself, I stand by my record and I definitely keep the same energy, even when it comes to privacy policy and stuff like that. So in the Nike versus StockX lawsuit, I said on this podcast, in that lawsuit, StockX disclosed that Nike execs have resold on their platform and that was potentially a privacy violation to disclose that. And then when the court-appointed receiver for ZetaKicks wanted Shopify to hand over customer data and Shopify wouldn't, I explained on this podcast, because of my background, that this is because Shopify will protect all customer data, that it's private. And even if it's part of an alleged Ponzi scheme mastermind, that if the court wants it, if someone wants it, they better go get a subpoena, because that's what it will take for any company to just hand over customer data. I'm also going to talk about companies and the desire to want to be the good guys and how companies present themselves in terms of brand language and corporate voice and tone. And even this is a topic I've talked about on this podcast before, specifically in the context of StockX, where early on their site, they had like this cool guy copy and text on their site. And I just thought it was bullshit. And I talked about it here on this podcast in the very early episodes. So on Twitter, people were like, well, what about when Atmos did this and when StockX did that? And if I saw it, I would have mentioned it just like how I'm mentioning it here. So I didn't see every single thing. And in the context of some sneaker store disclosing some customer information to dunk on a reseller or something like that, yes, that's bad. But in the context of a data collection company like EQL, that's entire business is data collection and data algorithms, a customer data breach is way worse. But what I'm saying right here is no one else has covered the world of sneakers and tech in more scope or more detail than me. No one else has covered the pros and cons of EQL specifically in as much detail or as fairly as me. It hasn't just been all glazing of EQL. I haven't got any free sneakers from JM Wind. I'm not working on a potential brand deal with EQL. No one else has coded an equalizer score simulator using their publicly disclosed algorithm. That was only me. So everything I've said has been without bias. It's just been my opinion, my critiques, and I think it's been fair. So whenever people say keep the same energy, that shit does not apply to me because I keep the same energy. This is why I was asking, do you want legit sneaker journalism or not? All right, let's get to the timeline of all these events and how they occurred. This all started with a tweet from Kari where he was praising EQL on how they handled the JTIPS Saucony release. That tweet said, quote, "I really don't know how anyone could hate on EQL. They totally changed the game in raffles for hyped product. Simple to use, easy to enter, and pretty seamless no matter the product," end quote. Then Twitter user jboston617 replied, quote, "No disrespect to anyone, but I might be one of the few that still does," end quote. And in his tweet, he included a screen recording of himself scrolling through the EQL website where it shows all your entries and they were all losses. So of note, he didn't show his name in that video. The sizes he entered were not displayed, and it went from today all the way down to December 2023. And also, just take note of how nice he was. He said no disrespect to anyone. He wasn't attacking anyone. So EQL's reply tweet to Jay Boston was, quote, "You won SB Udo last August. You're entering stuff that is mostly super hot in size 11.5. You have 4 different accounts with your name on them, and you've had a streak of 15 entries where you've entered twice," end quote. So you might be thinking, Sockman, what's the big deal here? And I'll explain what it is. But first, I want to set the table. What was their intent with that tweet? Was it informational to clear the record to help the guy? Or was it a dunk tweet to dunk on the guy? Well, actually, you did win and you're trying to game the service with multiple accounts. And we are the good guys and we stopped you. I don't know their intent. I don't know who was actually replying, but that's how they chose to reply. And obviously it was perceived by many people that EQL is dunking on this guy, that all the quote tweets at the time were LOL, EQL's got receipts, or get 'em. So I'm just going to refer to that tweet as a dunk reply tweet. And as a total aside, it's actually pretty funny that a dunk reply is that, no, actually you did win once last year. So I totally dunked on you that you won 365 days ago. That just kind of shows that your odds are probably 2%, and that probably works out to once a year. But anyways, my issue with the tweet was, for EQL to post that, they had to use the information that was available in the video to then look up his private account. And from there, they found out that he actually did win in August 2023, which was not included in the video. They found out his size is 11.5, which wasn't disclosed. They found out how many accounts he has, which wasn't disclosed. And they used all that information in the reply. And to be very clear, if all of that information was in that video, there is no issue at all. Case closed. I do not reply. Everyone laughs at the dunk because they just replied to what was in the video. When you post that kind of stuff, you are essentially waiving your right to privacy if you willfully share it. But none of that information was in Jay Boston's original tweet. They had to mine the data from the video that was posted, use that information to find his real account, and then replied publicly to him. So That right there is the privacy violation, that you have accessed customer data for your dunk reply. The intent of which is either a dunk to be informative, a joke, whatever it is. I don't know. That's their intent. So I know it appears like this is not a big deal. It's just, accessing the number of accounts and his sneaker size. It's just a wee little access of private information. And the guy was allegedly gaming the system, so he gets what he deserved, right? But in the tech world, or even in like the government secrets world, there's no such thing as a wee little leak. The mantra is that customer data must be protected at all costs, no matter who wants it or for whatever reason. And that's why Shopify told Zeta's court receiver, if you want Zeta's information on his sales, go get a subpoena or take a hike. So in the tech world, any leak of customer data should be treated as potential company-ending events. And you might be thinking, come on, Sock, it's being a little dramatic. But in the world of competition, if EQL had an actual competitor, that competitor could say, hey, don't use EQL, use us. We won't just leak all your information and dunk reply. You can't trust them, trust us. And then say Ama Manier or Union started using this competitor. And even say Shopify started recommending the competitor instead because they understood the importance of protecting customer data. EQL could then be toast. They could have been just pushed out. So the little dominoes meme where the guy has like one tiny domino and the end is this huge one? That's what I mean. One little dunk reply could set off a chain reaction where at the end your company is finished. But EQL doesn't have a competitor, but it shows that you do not want to get into this case at all, where you can set off a chain reaction where your company could be over. You can avoid that completely. And the answer is privacy. You just make it important. But I'll get to that a little bit later. I want to go back to the timeline of events because as I mentioned before, there's a few more sirens that went off in my head. So Jay Boston responds to that EQL dunk reply with, quote, 4 accounts, WTF, I honestly didn't know. Can I get in contact with someone to help with that? End quote. And EQL's response is, hit our support team. In the future, just enter once with one account with your own information. You will have more luck, end quote. So that was for completeness sake, but also just to show how Jay Boston responded to EQL. And like I said, I will give his side of the story a little bit later as well too. So as I mentioned before, when I saw that tweet with the privacy violation, it was a huge red siren going off in my head. And I was like, I think I need to respond to this because while everyone else is LOL, dunk replying, get them EQL, I was like, yikes, this is wrong. This is not what you're supposed to do in a tech company, in any company. So I felt the need to respond because when you're on the side of privacy, it's actually very easy to respond. You can just be all for privacy and you can say full stop after that and you'll be fine. And in my reply, I kind of made it personal and tried to be as nice and cordial as possible. And I shared my experience and reservations about linking my account on their Discord. I said, quote, this is honest feedback. This post is why I didn't join the Discord. I didn't want any of my private entry info potentially posted online like this, end quote. And as I had mentioned earlier, I did not do the connection because I did not want my SockJig Discord account linked with my personal information government named EQL account. Because something in me told me, hey, if I post some critiques about EQL on my podcast, will they use that against me somehow? Will they be angry about it? And afterwards, in my interactions with them, in private DMs, I didn't get the sense that they would, but something in the back of my head just said, there's no need to make this link anyways, because I don't use Discord that much, so I'll just leave it. Maybe I should have been more direct. Maybe I should have told them exactly why this tweet was wrong, that this is a privacy violation. But really, I was just kind of trying to tell them on the low that this tweet is problematic. Well, they didn't get the message because they started defending themselves in the replies. And Kari was in the replies defending EQL as well too, saying, he didn't think EQL would willingly violate privacy. And he said, quote, this was more reactionary because they got accused of foul play and not actually being what they advertised constantly, end quote. So I took the gloves off and I said it more directly. I said, quote, I would like to see the privacy policy that allows it so anything I enter in their system can be used to dunk on me on Twitter, end quote. And there was a couple back and forth. This Jay Boston is allegedly trying to cheat the system. And I just replied, quote, I don't care if he's innocent or guilty of abusing the system, but allowing a business to weaponize private information is wrong, in my opinion, no matter what, end quote. Honestly, I was a little shocked that people didn't get what I was saying here, but I understand where a non-tech person might not understand it. But I really was legit shocked that EQL did not get the hints of what I was trying to say here. They did not have that image of the domino man, of one small domino causing a giant chain reaction to end your company. And so, the discourse turned into a debate along the lines of, well, this is private information, and what is not private information is just his size. It's just a joke. No privacy was violated. It's not a big deal. He's clearly a reseller with multiple accounts. So all that stuff just sounded like white noise to me because it did not matter. There's no such thing as a wee little leak. There's no such thing as a small little violation. And a lot of those replies to me, I could have just stopped reading after the words but or however. Because like I said, when you're on the side of privacy, there should be no buts or howevers. Because when customer data has been misused for a dunk reply, none of that shit matters. None of the howevers matter. Customer data should be protected, full stop. Companies should not be able to make private customer data public for any reason without consent from the customer, full stop. They should not be allowed to use that information to dunk on critics, full stop. As far as I'm concerned, there's just no debate about it at all. So I didn't engage in any debate. I just kept saying, hey, I don't care if he's innocent or guilty. So I thought, well, that ought to do it. My work here is done. And I dusted my hands thusly and went on with my day. But then EQL replied to Kari's tweet with, quote, what Kari said, we made a one-time exception to let the guy know why he wasn't winning, end quote. And I was legit stunned reading that. Stunned, I tell you. There was a huge blaring siren going off in my head. We're at 2 sirens now at the siren count. 1 at the privacy violation and 2 at this one-time exception line. I mean, I tried to give them feedback that on the low, this is a potential privacy issue here. And their response was, well, we made a one-time exception. There should never be any one-time exceptions, period, point blank. Even if someone is wrong or trying to dunk on you or is lying or is a reseller or is a critic, if you have a one-time exception to your policy, that policy is completely useless. How do you get one-time exceptions? Is it just on the whims of the guy working that day on the Twitter account? Is there a secret handshake? If I say, come on, pal, make a one-time exception and just hand me all the entries for this raffle, I'll be your friend. Will that qualify? If I say that, hey, I'm actually from the Customer Data Acquisition Commission sent here by the government, and I need you to give me all this information as a one-time exception. If all of that sounds completely insane, then so does the fact that you're giving one-time exceptions to accessing private customer data. It's just as insane. So, as I said, when I saw it, I was legit stunned, but I didn't really want to engage any further in the replies with them. I just said, hey, I provided my feedback. I wasn't really trying to make them look bad. I was just trying to provide my feedback that there was a violation here, that this is wrong. But I also did not engage because I was legit thinking that whoever is sending those replies on the EQL Twitter account doesn't know what they're talking about. Because this is not something that a data collection tech company should say publicly on their Twitter account. If your core business is collecting and processing private customer data, you should not be publicly saying that we play it fast and loose over here and make exceptions. So another tweet I saw later, EQL replied to my friend So Why David, who was criticizing them along the same lines. And they said in a reply to him, quote, to be clear, we don't have access to this information. We asked someone internally to investigate the person's account since we saw the complaint and want people to get their fair share of wins. We've since removed the tweet, end quote. Okay, so this was siren number 3. Huge red blaring siren. 3 count on the siren count now. I was legit blown away by this tweet as well too. And this tweet was eventually deleted. But this is them admitting that whoever was on that Twitter account does not have access to it. So they expressly asked another team, hey, we need this information. Can you just hand that over? So that is basically admitting it, that they can transfer data between teams. No one cares. No one sees that there's any issue of just handing that data over. No one needs to know why it's going to be used or what it's for. There's no protocols or checks in place. It basically shows me that they're not treating it as very important data that must be protected at all costs, like Shopify did when they told the court about the, get a subpoena, essentially. They're treating it like pickleball. Here you go, back and forth, whatever you want. A small sidebar, let me give you a simplified example. Say at my work, I normally wouldn't have access to customer data, but suppose at my work, I'm the database guy and I have special clearance and access to customer data. If the CEO of the company came to me and said, I need you to give me this customer's data right now, it's for a huge project with millions of dollars at stake, what would I do? And honestly, if it wasn't the CEO, I would probably laugh in their face. Like, are you kidding me? But to the CEO, I'd say, sure, just send me the docs and the sign-offs that we need. Following the protocols that we have in place. If the response is, no, we don't have time for that, my response is, well, no, I can't do it. And in this scenario, I know there would not be any sign-offs in that, because a company that has private data can't use the data of one to get money from another, if that makes sense. That would be a privacy violation. But what I'm really getting at is that there should be a system and protocols in place for accessing any private data. And it has to be for a good reason. It has to be a government subpoena, as I said, or the customer's consent. Because if you just hand it over to anyone who asks, the implications are that there is a potentially company-ending event that could occur. So back to the timeline, somewhere along this line, about an hour later, they realized, hey, maybe what we did was actually wrong, and maybe SockJig is right. So they deleted the dunk reply tweet. They deleted all the other replies where they defended it. They deleted the one-time exception tweet. They deleted the reply to So Why David saying, another team just handed that data over to us. They apologized to Jay Boston and, said, thanks for the email. Sorry, we tweeted information about your account. We'll get you sorted. And that just shows you that they could have replied generically from the very beginning. That if someone posts this long video, you could reply to them, hey, please DM us. We noticed some issues. That is fine and generic. There's no violation for that. That is in the context of customer support and helping. But instead, no, they did not do that. They did the dunk reply for whatever reason. Their intent is their intent. There was another reply later where they said, quote, we didn't mean it for a joke. That wasn't our intention. It was a reply to let the guy know why he wasn't winning. He's contacted us in the past about losing. We'll remove it, end quote. So last thing on the timeline, later in the day, JM Wind, Jean-Michel Lemieux, current contractor or consultant for EQL, he tweeted as well, quote, given that not all social media interns are created EQL, I'm launching a new online course, How to Sneaker Twitter, end quote. Making a joke about that it was a social media intern tweeting it out, essentially, blaming the social media intern. It's either you got hacked or you blame an intern, right? So I have a lot of respect for JM Wind as he's known, but I personally saw this as a damage control tweet. And I personally don't believe a social media intern was sending those tweets. Maybe it could have been, but even if it was, it's a huge issue as well too, because you are letting some intern be the voice of your company publicly. And someone is sending private customer data over to an intern. And really who I think is at fault, I'll talk about at the end as well too. But I was actually surprised that I was getting a lot of blowback about this, that people were siding with EQL or saying that it's not a big deal. And I understand it at a certain level that, it's just a dunk reply, it's nothing. But from my background, I was trying to carefully explain that it is a big deal and the implications could be huge. But sometimes, people just dig their heels in and their side is their side. So I was like, I'll save it for the podcast. And I mentioned Kari was given EQL side and tweeting about his own personal story about being doxxed and comparing the two issues, kind of where was the outrage then type of thing. And then people were tweeting at me or responding to me in DMs, like saying, hey, is Kari subtweeting you? Is he talking about you here? And really, he was not talking about me. He was basically subtweeting Davon of Loose Laces, both previous guests of this show, Davon was going off in his unique way on Twitter as well too. And Kari and Davon have a beef, and really any issue between two people I know is kind of between them. I honestly did try once a long time ago for them to call a truce, and it did kind of happen for a small window, but then it was broken. And now I don't get involved. I don't stand in the middle like, the Jonathan Majors meme. So they have a long history and personal feelings there between two people. So I don't feel the need to try to white knight or get involved in the middle of issues between two people. But in the case of a company doing something wrong, I don't mind at all talking about it, because companies are not people. They don't have morals. I'm not offending a company. I might offend the people that are currently working there, but they might not be working there tomorrow. So I'm not really saying anything to them anyways. I'm saying it about how the company is acting. There's no personal feelings involved because the other side does not have personal feelings. Only the people that work there have personal feelings. So I responded to Kari, hey, I hope this is not about me. I was just giving honest feedback. And like I said, I was polite and I gave it honestly and as nicely as I could. And then only later did I further explain that, hey, I don't see any policy that you have that customer data can be used against the customer to dunk on them. And then EQL finally replied that said, hey, it was good feedback. Quote, it was a lapse in judgment. And then it got picked up. The gifts were funny, but we shouldn't have responded to that guy with account history. We've never done it before and won't do it again. We'll keep it to the DMs and customer support team, end quote. So there you go. Some good is made from this. They learned their lesson, hopefully. So that all happened on one day, like within an hour or two. And then it blew up again the second day because Jay Tips tweeted something about people had hacked his site, when really it was just like people clicked a link that Sneaker Twitter had posted about how to get his shoes earlier months ago. And people were doing the same kind of thing. The whataboutism. Well, hey, is this a violation of the policy? And I'm honestly still getting these kind of tweets sort of directed at me. Hey, all you EQL haters, are you going to skip this raffle? Like I said, people don't want legit sneaker journalism. They don't want to fairly and nicely call out a company for violating privacy, violating customer data. They just want you to be on their side, I guess. And that side, I guess, is evidently the side of a company and not on the side of people. But all these whataboutisms, they just fell flat to me. It just doesn't matter at all. But I also talked to Jay Boston 617 and I wanted to get his side of the story. And his side of the story is actually very interesting because people made him out to be like this serial cheater or reseller. So I asked him about it and he said he had one main account when EQL first started where he posted the video from. He said after 30 or 40 L's, he created a new account to get a win. And he said he used that once or twice and got L's, so he went back to his main account. Then he said after 60 to 80 L's, he tried a different email. And at that point, he said that's when he figured out that you were getting more information on how EQL works. So he abandoned that email and went back to his original account. And so he said he tried to erase those other accounts, but did not know how to do it. And they didn't have a feature for that. And so he felt as long as he didn't use those other emails, it shouldn't be a problem. Then he said after his 100th consecutive L, he asked his brother to enter some raffles for him. But instead of his brother putting in those raffles with his own name, the brother was using Jay Boston's name with the brother's address. So that explains why there were multiple entries on the last 15 tries. And all of this, it seems pretty normal for any sneakerhead just trying to win a raffle, especially if you didn't fully read how EQL works. And there's a lot of people that don't read the marketing material. That's up to the company to better explain that. And so, I saw so many people calling him all sorts of names, that he's trying to game the system, that he's a serial cheater, he's a reseller, he deserved it. So he didn't know the system. And sure, it's on him to learn it. And he said around 60 L's, he figured it out that, okay, now I've actually read it, I should go back to my main account. But early on, when some new service comes out, people don't dive in and learn it right away. Especially if they're a fly-by-night company. Imagine if you took all this time to read all about how Brooklyn Project's trusted app works. If you don't know what that is, that's because they didn't do anything. So when EQL first emerged and people did not read about it or learn about it, it's not on that person to want to invest in them. It's on EQL to properly get out there, get their message across and explain it. And I know they did do that, but people are people. They want to save themselves times. Why would I learn about something that could potentially be over right away? And if I didn't learn about it, I saved myself a whole bunch of time. People are just used to that. So it's up to EQL to continually educate people about their service. And if how they do that is not effective, that's on them. So one last thing is that Jay Boston said he did try contacting them in the past, which EQL did say in one of the tweets. And he said when he tried reaching out to them, they said there was nothing wrong with his account. And so he says to me, quote, "Why wasn't I told about this issue back then when we could have fixed the issue?" End quote. And there you go. Here's another case where just having good customer service of a customer saying, "I have an issue with my account," and instead of just giving a standard template response back, you could have figured out this whole issue and not have any of this dunk reply situation that we have here. What we've got here is a failure to communicate. Some sneaker companies you just can't reach, so you get what we had here last week. Sorry, that's from Cool Hand Luke, and it's been seared into my memory ever since I was 9 years old. So for the rest, I'm just going to talk in general terms about companies and moralities and my thoughts on company ending events. And then I'll bring it back and talk about who's to blame. So I briefly tried to explain this earlier and on Twitter as well too, about why it's a big deal when a company does something wrong, that I have no issue talking about it at all, because companies don't have feelings. They don't have a soul. They don't have morals. Only people have those things. Only people can evaluate morality. Only people have a soul. Only people have feelings. Companies can't evaluate morality. Only the people that work there can evaluate morality. For example, Nike. The company has no soul. They have no morality. However, Phil Knight, Bill Bowerman, Mark Parker, and countless others have souls. They have beliefs and morals. And they have embedded those beliefs into the fabric of how Nike operates. And anyone who works there is supposed to follow those rules or guidelines. Sometimes they're codified in actual like Nike 10 rules. Other times it's privacy policies and other policies. But those people, Phil Knight, Bill Bowerman, Mark Parker, they're not actively boots on the ground running the company right now. Other executives are. And those executives can either choose to follow those recommendations and follow Phil Knight's guidelines and Nike 10 rules, or ignore them and make their own. And honestly, one of the main criticisms of the current regime at Nike is that they've lost their way. They've strayed too far away from what makes Nike Nike. Another example, Twitter. Twitter has no soul. The previous owners and co-founders, those people had a soul, and they operated Twitter as how they saw fit, and they had rules for harassment and racism and doxing and all kinds of stuff. The new owner, Elon Musk, he has a soul, allegedly, and Twitter essentially operates based on his whims and how he chooses to operate and enforce guidelines. And if he wants Russian propaganda and hate speech to Indians and outright porn on the For You tab, then that's what he gets. These are just two examples of the current people that are working at current companies are the ones that can either follow established rules and guidelines or ignore them, or they operate without having any of these rules and guidelines in place, no protocols in place. However, most of the times, companies do not want to evaluate morality. Elon is the exception here. But for every other company in the world, they want to make money. They want to be in the service of society to give them a product or service that they need. They can, of course, choose to if they wanted to, like Elon does. And there's actually an old Simpsons joke where Marge says, No, we can't afford to shop at a place that has a philosophy. So what you do instead is you have these policies and guidelines, and everyone must follow those policies and guidelines and protocols. This is how companies get boring, but this is also how companies protect themselves. And this is how you deal with whoever your current employees of the time are. And I talked about it being a potentially company-ending event. And I talked about trust before as well, too. Add that to the list of keep the same energy. I talked about on this podcast that trust is basically the most important value you can have in a business. It's literally why the concept of brands and marketing even exists. That if customers don't trust you, they will go elsewhere. And that's why I say it's a potentially company-ending event. And let me give you an example here. In the world of data security, Say you're a cloud server company like Amazon Web Services, AWS, and you have customers that are Coke and Pepsi, separate clients. And they store all their vital secrets on your service, the recipe for Coke and Pepsi. And one of your employees makes a one-time exception and gives Pepsi the ultra secret recipe to Coke. Coke finds out, sues you for hundreds of billions of dollars, you go out of business. This is obviously an exaggerated example because most likely Coke and Pepsi would not be storing their ultra secret recipes on some external servers. They simply would not trust a company to do that. That's why I said trust is the most important thing for these companies to keep existing. But this is a company ending event example. So how would Coke or Pepsi avoid something like this? They would have to vet the company that they're using if they can trust them. And if this company has no protocols, has one-time exceptions, then they simply can't trust them and can't use them. So if this server company had proper protocols and security in place and training, then employees would know that they could not just access whatever customer data for whatever one-time exceptions that may come up from their social media intern or whoever. And then your company does not get sued for hundreds of billions of dollars and does not go out of business. Or say you're running a dating app like Hinge or something, and say there's a Democratic politician that is campaigning out there that say dating apps must be regulated or something. And your social media guy is not a Democrat and personally disagrees with this politician. So he asked the data team, hey, can you look up info on this politician if he uses our dating app? And they find out he does. And they find out that he's hitting on gay men while otherwise presenting himself as a straight family man. So according to the morals of that social media guy, the politician is wrong. And he replies to the tweet about regulation with a screenshot of his private, dating app DMs. So clearly you can see that this is wrong and a huge violation. But to the social media guy, maybe it's not wrong at all. This politician is a hypocrite. But if you just protected all that data no matter what, then your dating app doesn't get removed from the Apple Store and no one wants to use it anymore because that app will just out you if they don't like you. And this is why I was kind of blown away by some of the feedback I got. People who had LGBTQ advocate in their bio were disagreeing with me. No, this company did fine. That guy's a reseller. This is why, big or small, any breach of customer data has to be treated like it could potentially take your company down. And when you lash out at a critic for a dunk reply, what is there to gain? Twitter likes, quote tweets, the public is on your side, that you're the good guys and this reseller guy is a cheat. And what's to lose? Your company loses trust with the public and the company goes out of business, especially when the core part of your business is data collection and data processing with your raffle algorithm. So you have a lot to lose and very little to gain. And like I said, if you protect customer privacy and security and you just fall on that side, it's really easy. You don't get in any of these moral quandaries. You don't have to worry about the morality of the customer service or social media person working that day. You can just go by the privacy policy that you have. That's why it doesn't matter if some reseller hates your company and is slandering it online. You can choose not to reply, or you can do it generically. You just don't have to put your entire business on the line just to dunk on the guy. And as I said, Jean-Michel Lemieux, JM Wind, he works there as a consultant. He knows all about customer data privacy. He literally architected the system that holds all the customer data for all the Shopify stores. So there are very few people in the entire world that know more about everything that I talked about right here than the former CTO of Shopify, the world's largest e-commerce platform company. To me, overall, it just looks like they want to present themselves as the good guys, that we're here to help you. And look at us, we're dunking on resellers. When really, in this business of 2% wins, where people win once a year, it's super hard to be the good guys. You can obviously present yourself as the good guys, but then you can't be weaponizing private customer data to do it. So the failure here, one, the social media team, if it was an intern, you don't need to dunk on people in replies. You can be bland and generic. The data team that looked up the customer information as a request from the social media team, you just can't hand over customer data for whatever reason. But really, it's not their fault, the social media team or the data team. If they were just working a job where they can do whatever they want, then that's all they were doing. It's the failure of not having proper process or protocol for any of this, for not making customer data important and not realizing that it's a core value of your company, your data processing company, that you keep it private and treat it as something special. So it's a failure at that tech level of not having those protocols. It's a failure in marketing and voice and tone of wanting to be projected as the good guys, as a hero, that you need to dunk on people that try to show you that you're wrong. So ultimately, who's to blame? Whose fault is this? It's all the EQL executives that are to blame here. They're the ones who supposedly didn't have any protocols in place. They're the ones that may or may not have had the proper training in place, so the employees working there know not to do this. And therefore, they're the ones who didn't realize that you have to take protecting customer data serious. So I don't know why. They worked at Google before this, so they must know everything I just detailed here, because I don't work at Google. And I'm pretty sure Google treats customer data the exact same way as every other big tech company in the world. So maybe they didn't have the time to put these processes in place, or they didn't deem it as important. But like I said, if a competitor existed, the competitor could be all over this right now. They could be talking to customers. They could be talking to merchants. Hey, look how they treat your data. We won't do that. Use us, not EQL. So that's why I say you can't put the hands of your entire company imploding and going out of business in the hands of your social media intern, if it was your social media intern and not some executive doing it. So as far as I'm concerned, I did them a huge favor. I helped them out here. That's what I think. I gave them the information. I tried to give it to them on the low, tried to be as nice as possible. And really, this whole breakdown, this retrospective, this post-mortem, I could be charging for this as well too. This could be like a contractor hourly rate at $1,000 per hour. But hey, they got it for free here. So they might not still like me bringing this all up and talking about it publicly, but I wasn't the one who sent that dunk reply first. So to anyone who still doesn't think that this is a big deal, that's fine. I tried to explain it as best I could. I can assure you that tech companies treat customer data as a big deal, or they should be treating it as a big deal, because it could be a potentially company ending event. And for what? For a dunk reply, for very little to gain. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that was informative. And if it was not, you can go fuck yourself.